Keno took a while, slightly longer than Suzuki Satoru had expected, to pick out 4 dresses, and then she began tidying up the smaller things in her room. Because moving anything would leave traces and clue people into the fact that something had been there once, she decided to shuffle around everything in the vicinity to cover up those marks. Is that all you need to bring? In that case, we'll put your parents and maids in a room in the sewer. That way, they might be able to escape the attention of anyone who comes to this city. Alright, that should be the best way. If you know of any other way to avoid outsiders finding their hiding place, we can go with your suggestion. Keno shook her head. Then there was nothing for it. They would simply have to make do. Now then, Satoru-san. Since we'll be heading out, could you help me cut my hair? The change in topic had come as such a surprise that Suzuki Satoru responded in an offish way. It's like this, please look at this. Having cast fly, Keno glided over to one side of the room and nimbly retrieved a book from a shelf. This is book 3 of the Chronicles of the Prince of Fenia. In this book, when the princess set out on a journey, she cut her long hair. Keno looked a little embarrassed, but her eyes were shining bright. Ahem. Alright, I don't mean. Just as Suzuki Satoru was waffling over whether it would be alright to cut her hair for that reason, Keno came back in front of Suzuki Satoru with a pair of scissors. Then, please do the honors. I've never cut anyone's hair before, so let me get this out of the way first. I'm not confident at all in being able to give you a pretty haircut. Maybe if I had hair clippers I could do a passable job. But before that, I have something that I want to tell you. Suzuki Satoru took the scissors, picked up a lock of Keno's hair, and snipped off part of it. The severed hair landed in Suzuki Satoru's hand, where it aged and degraded, as though several hundred years had passed for it, until it became a puff of ash, vanishing cleanly just like the undead did when they were destroyed. Keno, I'm going to cast a spell on you. Don't resist it, alright? Alright. It should be fine. He returned the scissors to her, and while still holding the lock of Keno's hair, he cast the offensive spell Ray of Negative Energy. While negative energy damaged the living, it would heal the undead instead. Upon taking the magical attack Keno's hair to be precise, the lock in Suzuki Satoru's hand, which had been trimmed, regained its original length. That was how it was. In the moment that one became undead, one's appearance was fixed. In that case, what would happen to people who were missing limbs or otherwise maimed when they became undead? That question flashed through his mind, but he could not think of an answer, and it would have been pointless anyway, so he banished the thought from his mind. Keno, I think cutting your hair is considered damage to you. Really? At least he could save himself the trouble of cleaning up the cut hair. So even if I mess up, I can start anew over and over again. So I'm just going to do a careless job this time round. Carelessly. Suzuki Satoru ignored Keno's cry of surprise and cast life essence, then cut Keno's long hair to shoulder length. It's fine. The damage is minimal, to the point where you could ignore it. It was only after she felt the hair behind her that she managed to calm down. Satoru-san. When you said you were going to cut it carelessly, I got the shock of my life. After hearing the reproachful tone in Keno's voice, Suzuki Satoru began to seriously consider the matter. Should I apologize, then? Nothing good would come of ruining his relationship with a future traveling companion. It was my fault, Keno. No, it's alright, it's okay now. Then why were you so eager to blame me just now? Suzuki Satoru barely stopped himself from saying. Keno's just a child, A child. Don't tell me she's a senior lady. Suzuki suddenly began thinking about that, but abandoned it in the end. In any event, he trimmed the rest of her hair to roughly shoulder length. Then, he used a borrowed comb. Truth be told, he had no confidence in himself at all to comb out the hair. It's done. Or rather, I think it's done. Keno walked in front of the changing mirror, but it was covered in dust, and could not show Keno's image. Just as she was about to wipe the mirror, her hand stopped halfway as she remembered the reason why she was sustaining a fly spell. Then, she turned around to Suzuki Satoru. How does it look? It suits you. It becomes you, Suzuki Satoru answered. Really? That makes me happy. Keno gave him a winsome smile. She seemed to be in good spirits. Suzuki Satoru knew nothing about what was pretty, what was not, the finer points of women's hairstyles and the like. But it would seem what he had said had played it safe. Now then, let's move on to the next step. After taking Keno's parents and a maid in the room in the sewer that had been Keno's base, he shackled the door with rusty chains so it would not open. While mindless undead like zombies could not open the doors on their own, it was probably best to bar it just in case. Keno had mixed feelings as she looked at the room door, and Suzuki Satoru spoke to her. Alright, next up, how do you want to travel, Keno? We are undead. We do not tire, we don't need to eat, and we don't need to sleep. We can head out right now without taking anything else with us. But when that happens, people will start asking questions when we enter villages or cities. Therefore, I'd like to do something that won't arouse suspicion. Like say, dragging lots of luggage around with us. Wouldn't that make people suspicious? In truth, Suzuki Satoru had no idea how the people in this world traveled. Therefore, he had no idea how to avoid suspicion. Keno turned her head aside and said she did not know. In that case, which do you prefer, between taking a carriage or going on foot? I'm not bothered by either, it's fine. We don't have the concept of fatigue, after all. Ah, but I walk really slowly, so. It's fine, don't worry. I'll match your pace, Keno. That said, since they were undead, could they not just run at full speed all the time? That said, surely seeing an adult run around with a little girl by his side would leave a bad impression on others. I'll go get a carriage, then. But what about the horses, how should we get one? Ah, that's true. As for horses. Suzuki Satoru looked out the window. He could not see any sign of horses, but he could see zombies. Even if there were horses, they would probably be horse zombies, and the other people in the city would not suffer a zombie horse pulling a carriage through a city. That was definitely out. Suddenly, just then, Suzuki Satoru had an idea. Don't worry. I'll do something about the horses. Just relax and leave it to me. The problem is the carriage. Covered wagons, cargo wagons, box wagons, on what grounds are we going on our journey? Huh. Are we going to be a princess and her magic caster follower? In that case, then perhaps our country has a kind of pumpkin-shaped carriage. That might be the best scenario for us. Suzuki Satoru had said so in a slightly joking tone, but Keno nervously said, what about a kind magic caster and his follower? Just in case, I want to check, but am I the kind magic caster in question? Well, you are the follower. Yes. Then that suggestion is rejected. Suzuki Satoru did not think he could make full use of Keno as his follower to put on an act. In that case, Keno said, and then she fell into thought. After that, she absent-mindedly spoke up. How about friends? Friends, so we're traveling companions. Alright, our backstory is that we're friends. After taking the difference in their ages into consideration, a lot of people would probably find it strange that they were friends. However, Suzuki Satoru did not feel that way. He had often seen kids who had just graduated elementary school working alongside him, and it was very hard to tell someone's age by their appearances in Yggdrasil. In fact, the leader of a guild which had rivaled Ainz had been a child in real life. And on the flip side, there were players who looked like kids, but whose actual age was over double that of Suzuki Satoru's. When he heard them talk about their grandchildren, Suzuki Satoru froze in confusion for a moment. He still looked back on those days with nostalgia. To that Suzuki Satoru, there was nothing strange about treating Keno as his friend. Of course, Suzuki Satoru knew that Keno was weaker than him, so the two of them were probably protector in charge. However, it was very common in Yggdrasil for experienced players to team up with newbie players to power level them, as well as partying up with non-combatant crafter party members to run around. Still, we need an explanation that will convince people we're friends when we enter towns. I guess we can take our time thinking it up during our journey. Alright, although, when you mentioned a pumpkin-shaped carriage, did you mean the edible kind of pumpkin? Is it a carriage that can be used as emergency rations when we're hungry? Ah, no, it's just shaped that way. Suzuki Satoru felt that verbally explaining would be troublesome, and so he rummaged through his inventory. I wonder if I have one. He took out a photo album taken with his friends. Suzuki Satoru flipped quickly through it. The memories recalled by the many pictures filled Suzuki Satoru with nostalgia. While part of him wanted to keep staring at them, he forced himself not to do so, and continued going through the pages. The photo he was looking for was not in this album. Suzuki Satoru switched to another one, and then a third. This one. Keno, look at this picture. The carriage is in the same frame as one of my female friends. Keno pressed in from the side, and then her jaw dropped. A slime in a dress, a woman. Is she a slime princess? Upon a wagon was a princess in a white dress, holding a shield aloft Bukubikuchigama. It had been a picture to commemorate the completion of the carriage, but Bukubikuchigama had ended up becoming the subject of the photo. That also showed which of them had a more striking appearance. Hahaha, I'll tell you about this during our trip. Now, slightly below is the pumpkin carriage. I heard that shape is the kind girls dream about. That's why she's so happy. Although, her brother had once muttered, you can't call her a girl at that age. Keno looked over, visibly disturbed. You mean, like bad dreams? Hahaha, wait, what? Suzuki Satoru was confused. He had laughed out of genuine mirth, but Suzuki Satoru felt a sense of discomfort as his joy was quashed. Don't tell me the undead emotional suppression doesn't just apply to negative emotions. No, when I think about it, that is the case. Not needing to eat or drink isn't bad, but that also means you can't eat buffing food. It's got its good and bad points. What's wrong? Satoru-san. Perhaps it was because his worries had been suddenly quelled, but Suzuki Satoru responded to Keno's question with a gentle "it's fine." Even so, it didn't completely suppress my happiness. There ought to be a way to live on while seeking joy. Right, then let's start looking for carriage. Ideally, we want an old traveler's carriage, the kind that doesn't make people suspicious when you use it. Yes. Keno, when you told me not to take other people's property, doesn't that mean taking their carriage would be a bad thing? Keno thought about it for a while, and then answered, "It'll be fine because we're paying for it." Then, she raised her rucksack. "I see. In that case, can I borrow some money from you, Keno?" "Huh. As I showed you earlier, I have ample funds. However, all of them are gold coins that aren't in circulation throughout this country. It seems dangerous to try and pay with them." "Is that so? Well, if you feel that way, then I can lend. No, I can offer, give you some." "No, that won't do, Keno. To some extent, that money is your inheritance from your parents. You can't just hand it over to others." I see. Well, you might not be able to agree under these circumstances. That also includes the relics of your ancestors. You mustn't spend it blindly, okay? I understand. Keno might have said that, but her expression suggested that she did not quite get it. Perhaps Suzuki Satoru was simply forcing his views on her. "Therefore, can I borrow some money? I'll pay you back until I sell the gems I have on hand." "Alright. Good. Then we'll split the costs for buying the wagon. We're friends, so we'll put up the same amount." "Of course." "Right. Then let's go find a carriage." "Sure thing." Suzuki Satoru responded to Keno with great gusto, and the two of them wandered around the streets. Along the way, Suzuki Satoru put the gold coins from this world which he had borrowed from Keno into his pocket dimension. While it was stored in a separate location from the Yggdrasil coins, they did not seem to count against his weight limit. If they did, then he would not be able to store anything in his inventory. This was a perfectly rational design decision for a game, but he ought to be in a real world now. It's really handy, but it kind of ruins realism in a place like this. Am I really not in a game? Although his undead body had confirmed to Suzuki Satoru that he was not in a game, the handiness of his inventory made him feel like he was still in a game. It felt unpleasant, like the game was overriding the real world. Ultimately, however, Suzuki Satoru would not get an answer, no matter how much he thought. More importantly, there are still many other things to consider. They had found several carriages, but all of them were heavily worn out from age, and looked like they would crumble if one tried to use them. He did not want to waste too much time, but searching alone would have been dangerous, so he brought Keno with him on his search. After a long time, they finally found a serviceable covered wagon in a small shed adjoining a large house. The strange thing was that this shed had a jail of some sort in its basement, and there were countless female zombies inside the jail. It was an insoluble mystery, but Suzuki Satoru pretended that he had not seen it. After all, no matter what he did now, it would be too late. Suzuki Satoru pushed the wagon with his superhuman strength to test it out. The wagon creaked, but the axles did not feel like they would break straight away. It would seem the wagon had been enchanted in its key areas. But they didn't enchant the whole thing. Why is that? Still, it was pointless to think about such things. Suzuki Satoru created a gate in front of the wagon and began to push. Keno went to Suzuki Satoru's side and helped him push. The idea of summoning the Griffin Lord had come up, but he had asked her to save her power. While it was hard to save, Keno's strength was of much assistance. The two of them pushed the wagon outside the city. He kept the gate open, then grabbed the shirt of the guard from earlier, who was still wandering around in the vicinity, dragged him over, then pushed him through the gate before ending the spell. "Now then, I'll prepare a substitute for a horse." What Suzuki Satoru took out was a majestic statue of a horse with its forelegs in the air. He placed the statue of animal warhorse on the ground, and it instantly expanded into a mighty equine. "Wow, that's an amazing horse. We didn't even have anything this great in our home. You're amazing, Satoru-san." The smile on Keno's face might have been the first to match her age that he had seen to date. After seeing her honest reaction, Suzuki Satoru chuckled. Suzuki Satoru ordered the golem horse to move to the front of the wagon, where he tied it to the wagon with ropes. He sat on the driver's seat and ordered it forward, and the golem horse complied. Only then was Suzuki Satoru relieved. This relief was because the horse conjured from an item could be used to pull a wagon. Suzuki Satoru had never sat on a horse or even touched one before, so he should not have been able to make an ordinary horse in this world pull a wagon. But fortunately enough, that problem had been solved. Suzuki Satoru could not help but be awed by his quick thinking. "Now then, Keno, let's head to the neighboring city first and see how things are there. Then, we'll solve the mystery of the zombification someday, and find a way to save everyone." "Yes. I'm counting on you, Satoru-san."